Can you see it?
Yes, now it's now in the conversation.
Sweet. Okay, I want to start by sincerely thanking Sam and the When Belief Dies channel for inviting me to this Devil's Advocate debate, and I want to thank Trent for agreeing. Trent and I have had fun, engaging, and substantive discussions in the past, and I doubt today will be any different, so let's get started. Let me begin with a preliminary remark. I will assume David Hume's famous distinction between is and ought, or roughly the distinction between science and morality. There is no controlled science experiment that will settle the question of abortion, and no moral conclusion will follow from scientific facts. With that said, let's look at my main argument. Premise A claims that prenatal humans are living humans. Premise B is the most controversial premise, and one nearly all pro-choicers reject. So two of my arguments will defend it. Premise B claims all humans have a right to life. Therefore, conclusion C follows. Prenatal humans have a right to life. Premise D is a moral assumption. We have a powerful pro tanto moral reason not to kill what has a right to life. So conclusion E follows from premise D. We have a powerful pro tanto moral reason not to kill a prenatal human. If premise B is more probable than its negation given certain moral and metaphysical assumptions, then we at least have a pro tanto moral reason against elective abortions. My probable pro-life argument is a rebutting defeater for pro-choice. I'll now focus on giving reasons for accepting premise B in a qualified form. Recall I'm arguing there is a powerful pro tanto reason not to kill you or me. So all else being equal, you and I should not be killed. But what explains this fact? I think a likelihood inequality will help us see why pro-life better explains this fact than pro-choice. Pro-life confers a probability of exactly 1 on the observation we should not be killed. So it entails an observation all parties to the discussion concede. However, pro-choice does not entail this observation unless we make additional moral and metaphysical assumptions. I want to argue that what explains the truth of this likelihood inequality is that the prior probability, that is the probability given other moral and metaphysical assumptions, of pro-life is greater than that of pro-choice because it is simpler. When I claim that pro-life is simpler than pro-choice, I mean it's both more modest and more coherent with the moral and metaphysical assumptions we accept before even asking the abortion question. By more modest, I mean pro-life is less arbitrary. For pro-life draws a principal distinction between humans that should not be killed and humans that may. I'll soon explain this distinction. Pro-choice, on the other hand, arbitrarily excludes prenatal humans from the class of beings that should not be killed. This arbitrary distinction comes at the theoretical cost of modesty, because pro-choice will have to make additional moral and metaphysical assumptions to make probable the observation that you and I should not be killed. It might be objected pro-choice affords more coherence with our moral and metaphysical assumptions at the cost of being less modest. I will argue this is not so for at least 3 reasons. The first is Don Marquis' future like ours argument. The second is an argument from Alexander Pruss, and the last is one from moral risk. The first argument I'll give in favor of premise B comes from the philosopher Don Marquis and claims that a future like ours, or flow, implies a right to life, and nearly all humans, including prenatal humans, have a future like ours. Therefore, nearly all humans have a right to life. The future of a prenatal human includes a set of experiences, goals, and acts relevantly similar to those of postnatal humans like you and me. The loss of a prenatal human's future of value from an induced abortion is at least as great as the loss of the future of value lost from the killing of a postnatal human. I argue this is a sufficient condition for our having a pro tanto reason not to kill any human. These claims are also in deep tension with pro-choice. These moral and metaphysical assumptions do not cohere well with pro-choice. My next argument comes from the philosopher Alexander Pruss and will probably be my most difficult, so I will break it down into 3 digestible stages. The first stage begins with a question about what makes something the same unified entity through time. It's natural to suppose my mother was once pregnant with me, but this can actually be argued for. Firstly, the prenatal human call it phi, that once lived in my mother's womb never died. So phi must still exist in some form. Secondly, the parts and features of phi continuously grew into mine. If we ask where phi is now, the obvious answer is exactly where I am. But there can't be multiple physical objects of the same size and shape in the exact same location. Thus, phi and I are one and the same entity. So much for the first stage. The second stage draws our attention to the metaphysics of identity claims. If two things are one and the same, then they have all the same essential properties. I have the property of having a right to life, essentially. I am also one and the same entity as phi, so it follows that phi also has the property of having a right to life, essentially. This also makes sense of a common moral intuition that the earlier I am killed, the greater the harm, because I am deprived of more life than if I were killed later. So much for the second stage. The third and final stage is the easiest. It draws our attention to the fact that there is no moral difference between me when I was a prenatal human and you when you were a prenatal human. If I had a right to life when I was a prenatal human, and there is no moral difference between me, you, and any other human with a future like ours, then it follows that all humans with a future like ours have a right to life. But nearly all humans have a flow. Again, we've arrived at my premise B. My final argument involves moral intuitions we have given uncertainty. Here's how Cameron Bertuzzi has illustrated it. Suppose you are hired to demolish a building. As project manager, you hire a team of experts to get the job done. When the time arrives to press the trigger, you ask your safety officer if she is positive there is no one left in the building. She replies, I did a walkthrough last night and didn't see anyone, but I'm not 100% sure. It's clear what ought to be done at this point. Given the small but reasonable chance someone is still in the building, you ought to postpone the demolition. Going forward at this point would be morally reckless and negligent. I think we can mirror this reasoning. If there is a non-negligible chance all humans with a future like ours have a right to life, then we have a powerful pro tanto reason not to kill them. So we morally ought to fail conservative. Given my argument so far, there is a non-negligible chance all humans with a future like ours have a right to life. Further, nearly all humans, including prenatal humans, have a future like ours. Therefore, we all morally ought to fail conservative. We've arrived now at a qualified version of premise B from my probable pro-life argument. In conclusion, I want to recap my case. I labeled my main contention premise B. It claims that all humans with a future like ours have a right to life. If this claim is conceded along with my preliminary remarks and moral assumptions, then it follows we have a powerful pro tanto moral reason against nearly any elective abortion. This conclusion is also directly bolstered by my fail conservative argument. Based on the non-negligible chance that humans with a future like ours have a right to life, the preceding reasoning might give us a definitive answer to the question of abortion. I've argued pro-life is a higher prior probability than pro-choice. That is a higher probability of being true given other moral and metaphysical assumptions. I then defended this claim by arguing that pro-life is both more modest and more coherent than pro-choice. Pro-life is more modest because it makes no arbitrary exception to the moral principle that all humans have a right to life. I then gave at least 3 arguments for the claim pro-life is more coherent given certain moral and metaphysical assumptions. The first of these arguments was that all humans have a morally relevant future like ours, or flow. My second argument claimed I am one and the same entity as a prenatal human. In the past, we called phi, and there is no moral difference between me, phi, and all other humans with a flow. Finally, I argued there is a non-negligible chance with a flow to have a right to life. So we have a powerful pro tanto moral reason not to kill nearly any human, which is to say we should fail conservative. I'll go ahead and end there.
Thanks, Ben.